There's lots of conversation where you're really uncomfortable and you do make a mess of it. You have conflict throughout your career. You might have an awkward conversation with your boss. You might have what I had and a big bust up with your directorship. It's those experiences that you go through, they actually make you stronger. And they're not a mistake or a muck-up. They're actually a lesson.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to The Messy Middle, a podcast designed for people tired of chasing external methods to resolve our internal messiness. I'm your host, Andrew Horsfield. The purpose of this podcast is to have conversations with leaders and experts in their field who share personal and practical strategies that you can implement to advance your career, company and life. You can find out more or listen to previous episodes at andrewhorsfield.com/podcast. The author and management consultant Warren Bennis once said, "The key to leadership is our capacity to translate vision into reality, to turn the things we desire into the things we deliver." And someone I know who has made an art form out of this is Cate Bakos. Cate is the founder of Cate Bakos Property, a multi-award-winning property investment and advisory practice and one of Australia's most respected buyers advocates. She's also the author of 2 books, co-host of the Property Trio podcast, a mother, board member and regular media commentator. In this episode, we talk to Cate about how she started her business, the value of building a good reputation, lessons she's learned from failure, how she aligns ambition with happiness, as well as a key lesson about money that she wishes everybody knew. I hope you enjoy this conversation about how to live and lead well with Cate Bakos. Cate, welcome to The Messy Middle. This is a bit of a treat to be able to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation just around your own life, business, and some of the things that have helped you live, lead and work well. So welcome to The Messy Middle. It's awesome to be talking with you.
Yeah, it's exciting to be on the show. I love chatting with you, so thanks for the opportunity. Before
we delve in too deeply, take me back to sort of the start of, Cate Bakos Property and what it was like back when you started, what it's like now. It'd be really interesting as a way to start our conversation.
Yeah, to put my vulnerability hat on, I was a director at a business in North Melbourne, and, that was a great opportunity for me. I took on a role that paid sweat equity. So for anyone that's not familiar with that term, you jump in there, you don't get paid, but whatever you can create, you get a cut of. And that just excited me. Wouldn't have excited everyone, and it's not something for everyone, but at that stage I just had so much fire in my belly and, I was qualified and ready to go. So I launched my business after, what I'd call a bit of an unpleasant parting of ways, which is a shame, but sometimes that's how it goes. But it was my time. So I had to take on a lease, find myself a photocopier and sign up for that as a lease as well. All of the things that you're committing to financially and thinking, oh my gosh, this has to work. I was able to spread my wings and purchase a property myself here in Yarraville and set up the office that we're in today. And to circle back to your question, what's changed? I've built a business and I've built my brand, and you still have to spend that time talking to new prospects and making sure that you're working with clients that are the right fit and giving them a lot of confidence that you're the right person for them. That doesn't change, but that sense of bringing in business, and I guess some would call it the hustle, that does change after you've been in business for quite a while. You get referrals, you get repeat customers, people talking to family members. It's got a beautiful role to it when you're doing the right things and your business is going well. You don't have to do all of that early stage marketing to meet new people.
Yeah, and it was a question I was going to ask you later, but it's appropriate now. Not all business owners are also good leaders. They're not necessarily always complementary skills. How do you balance that in your own personal psychology and value set with all of those other roles and things that you've got to manage?
I think if I'm being really honest, I don't think I'm the most amazing people manager, but I love my staff. We've got we've been working together for long enough. I've got to pay attention to balancing being their friend and being their boss, and that's a tough juggle sometimes. But I really enjoy it, and I think any leader needs to recognise that their business is what it is because of the people in it. You know, I do a lot of good things and I work very hard, but my staff do as well. And so the clients that love the experience with my business aren't just loving me, they're loving all of them. And that thought has to always be at the very front of your mind. And losing good people really hurts, and they're hard to replace, and it takes a long time to get new starters up to that level. And any business owner will know that. You know, the toughest thing can be staff. So when you have longevity and you can have great open conversations and there's lots of respect there, and you've got to be as flexible as you need to be to make sure that their working conditions work for them. You know, I think that's a big part of cracking the code. You can love what you do, but if you've got your stuff falling apart around you or you've got constant turnover, it's a mess. So if I pat myself on the back, it's not because I think I'm an amazing leader, but the evidence suggests that my staff have been with me and they've been loyal and they're doing a great job. So I'm doing something right.
Yeah, and transferring that into your role as a buyer's advocate, where relationships are so important, and you've got probably multiple relationships to maintain. There's obviously the one with agents to get properties and things, but you've also got to be assertive for your client to get the right price of that property. And then amongst all of that, maybe even with the client of what their expectations are and what they either can afford or the type of property. How do you manage all of those relationships and keep a sense of integrity for yourself in that mix, Cate?
Well, I'm in the real estate industry, which, you know, adds another layer to it because it's not an industry that's renowned for its honesty. And when you're doing deals, when you're negotiating, you don't always want to put everything on the table or tell an agent, you know, every single nitty-gritty detail in the background. But my policy is honesty, not to the degree that I'd say this is my absolute maximum limit and I'm going to auction. But it's okay to say I'm not actually prepared to tell you that. So that's an honest answer as well. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit blunt, but as long as you're honest and you're friendly and you're caring, I think that can take you a long way in any industry, but particularly in real estate. I don't like playing games and having fibs with agents. It can often bite you. Every now and then you've got a conversation, and trust me, there's quite a few times it's not just an infrequent thing, it's frequent. You're having a conversation that they might not want to hear, that might make you feel quite uncomfortable. But you've just got to preface it and sometimes say, this is uncomfortable because it might upset you, and that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is equip you with some background information so that you can enable me to get you the best result. And sometimes that's the same with the agents. I said to an agent just as recently as this morning, I've given you the offer. I know you're asking me if there's any more in the tank, but I don't want to bid against myself. And I frankly think that the offer I gave you is a very, very good one. So instead of asking me to bid against myself or telling me that you've got this closed tender process, I want you to go back to the vendor and ask them what they're prepared to do with my offer, because we do have other properties we're considering. And that's a very firm conversation, but knowing it's not a bluff and knowing when you can bluff, when you shouldn't bluff, when you can't bluff, that's part of the deal in this business.
Difficult conversations is one of those things that most people would like to avoid and not have to contend with.
Yeah.
I mean, you've given us a couple of tips already around setting some intention. How else do you approach that allows you to step into it, even though you're saying that there might be some nervousness or apprehension about it?
It takes a lot of practice. And when I say practice, there's lots of conversations where you're really uncomfortable and you do make a mess of it and you just want to curl up and die. And you've actually got to treat that as a learning and ask yourself how you could have better dealt with it. And every single time you go through that, you grow, you get something out of it. You have conflict throughout your career. You might have an awkward conversation with your boss. You might have what I have and a big bust up with your directorship. And I've been through a divorce when I was younger. That business breakup was way harder than my divorce. And it's those experiences that you go through, they actually make you stronger. They're not a mistake or a muck up. They're actually a lesson. And if you can talk it through when you have ruffled someone's feathers, you need to be prepared to say sorry when you wish you did things differently, and I'm sorry that you took it the wrong way. I'm sorry that I hurt you, and I think I know how I hurt you. I said it in this way, and what I meant was X, Y, Z, but what resulted was, A, B, C, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And even if the opportunity is gone, if you've got a chance to fix a relationship just by having that willingness to say, I think I got that wrong and I'm sorry and I want to talk to you about it. How could have I done this better? This was the intent, but the delivery didn't quite work. You'll be surprised how many people will really respect that. I've ruffled a lot of agents' feathers over the years. I've resolved some over a phone call. I've had them frosty with me until the next deal when it was executed better and went well. I've had beers in pubs. I've written cards. You've got to be prepared to call it when you get it wrong. And the same goes with your staff. And with a client, if they're upset, you've just got to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think you're right for people listening to reinforce. My experience would match yours, is that if you're pursuing that conversation with a level of integrity, people will feel that motivation or integrity that's behind it, even if it is a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you try and manipulate your way into it or avoid the hard part, that's the part that can create complication and the messiness that makes people want to avoid it.
Yes.
And I think also, just to encourage what you said, which is you've got to have them. I think it's one of those things that you get better by practice and mistakes and also doing it well and reflecting on that.
I agree. And you know what? Sometimes the arguments or the fights or the, punch-ons in the ring that I've had, the agents or the clients or whatever it might be, once the relationship's repaired or the situation's resolved, they really respect you for that. Not all of them, but a lot of situations. And I've got agents that laugh about how tough I am. Well, we're mates now, we're fine, but they know. It's good for people to know that you've got that backbone and you've got that ability to call it or to not roll over.
As a business owner, how do you make decisions, whether not just in property, but just with your own business? How do you take information in, assess, what's going to work and what's trouble?
I'm pretty good at making quick decisions, but a quick decision is different to a snap decision. So when you've already got the knowledge and the plan and the strategy and you see the right property, you've done your analysis, the price is right, boom, you do it. And the quickest decision I'll ever make when it comes to buying property is actually at auction. It's split-second decision. It's like racing a racing car. When I do any more than 3 auctions on a Saturday, you can be guaranteed I'm not going to make it past 8:30 that night. I will be the worst dinner company ever because you've got the adrenaline running and you're making those very quick decisions. Do I do a 1? Do I do a 5? Do I ask the agent a question? And you want to lay down those bids really, really quickly. So in my mind, the clock slows down and I'm just able to be so channeled. So I know how to make a fast decision. I think a snap decision, though, that's sometimes when you are feeling the weight of that decision, and we've all had them, do you break up with someone? Do you commit to something huge and financial? Do you have this conversation with someone? There's lots of big decisions that we make in our lives. They aren't snap decisions, and you've got to wait until your gut's settled. When you've got that feeling in the pit of your gut, that's when you're ready to make that decision. Sometimes you need to talk to others. Other times you need to let it settle with you. I sometimes sleep on things. Other times I might give myself a week to process what I want to do. They're the big ones. I think that's what business owners do. We know how to dream about risk and reward and opportunity and threat and all of those things, but it has to be when the pit of your gut tells you what to do, and that's what I trust.
So it's more a gut instinct and emotional that you listen to as opposed to a mapping out process or a formal process?
I do the mapping out in the formal process so that I'm well aware of the upside and the downside, but then you're looking at the magnitude of each and you're asking yourself, do I want that change? And am I ready for it? And can I deal with the collateral damage? And if you can and when you can. Sometimes it's a great opportunity, but the collateral damage is too much, or the direction that you're taking your business in is not true to you. And that's sometimes what I need to really mull over.
Have you or do you use mentors or allies in your camp to help you, make these decisions and build your business? And what's your experience of that?
My greatest mentor and ally is my husband. And he's awesome and always willing to chat about my business. What I also know is what he doesn't understand or appreciate and how we're different. So I will often talk things through with him. I don't always take his advice, and that's okay. He's very respectful of that. He understands that we're pretty different, and I'm running this business. I'm here every day. I'm working with my clients and with my staff and with the agents. Other people that I can lean on are industry colleagues, and they're actually competitors who are really dear friends. I've got a handful of them. So how lucky am I? We could go out and talk about, our vulnerabilities and how our businesses are going, and I've got that incredible, respect from them, and also, the conversation that takes place within these four walls. I think that's awesome. I do rely on my team as well. If we've got some decisions to make, clearly I want to bring them with me. I'll get their take on that decision. And I've also got other business people, including some amazing real estate agents who run impressive agencies, who have been there for me and who have been able to just give you that pearl of wisdom that someone else might not be able to.
In the real estate world, where weekends are a time where the real estate industry is at fever pitch often, how do you manage that emotional equilibrium and keeping yourself energised for life, not just for the working side of life?
I've got much better at it. I was really rubbish. I scored like a 2 out of 10. If you'd asked me or my friends this question 10 years ago, I was just working so hard. And Saturday's game day, you can have, 5 auctions and not get them all, but you've got to prep for them all, and then you've got to deal with the clients when they're really sad. Some clients cry. And if your last auction finishes at 3:30 and you get home at 4:30, or maybe you win that auction and they're excited and they want to have a celebration drink at the pub, get home at 5:30, then you've got to get changed, go out for dinner, or put on a roast dinner or whatever it might be. It's a juggle. I cannot tell you how many times I've texted my husband or my daughter saying, turn the oven on 180 and get that chicken out and everything's prepped and do this. And they should be there soon. Can one of you set the table? Like, that's madness, but that's normal in my world. I love my friends and family, and I've got a lot of energy, and I love the social stuff. And I'd be very, very sad if a Saturday night was cancelled on me. But as I said earlier, some nights I'd be lousy company because I'm wilting. And then Sundays, I like to think that it's my day with my family. But the truth is I do my Sunday blog nice and early. So I get up at 6:30 every morning, or 5:30 during the week, and 6:30 on the weekend. Do my blog, they wake up, then we can hang out. And that's something to look forward to as well. But you don't get a lot of time off in real estate. And what I've had to introduce over the years is getting that time off so that I am energised, and Saturdays are never a burden. I love them. And so I take off a Friday afternoon, and I also try very hard every fortnight to pick an evening where I can finish work early and we can got a nice little weekender. We can go down there, have a good evening together, watching a movie or going for a walk, go to the local pub or whatever. And then I can work from home the next morning and then just, do some work in the car and get driven back to work. So it's just trying to find that balance, and I'm getting a lot better at it. But at the end of the day, property is a bit like obstetrics. If the deal starts, you have to be there. The baby's coming, you're there. So, it's just making sure that when you've got that downtime, you take it, and also making sure when you say you're having a half a day off a week, clear the decks and do it.
Yeah. And do you have any other sort of rules or rituals or a personal mantra that guides some of that decisions that you make, or how you live well and cultivate a good life for yourself that guide those decisions and actions?
Yes. And it's taken a long time for me to be able to say this. Pick the clients that you will enjoy working with, and really pick nice people. That's the answer. Someone can be a bit stressed out when they're stressed out, and that's okay. But I get a very good feel very quickly if they're not my kind of person, because I don't want to upset my staff and load their cart with a difficult personality who's disrespectful. And I don't want to have the 80-20 apply where 20% of my clients are giving me 80% of my grief and making it difficult for the 80% that are nice people. And, it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but if it's not working at the start, it's probably not going to work. So I'm very, very selective. And, there's polite ways of saying to someone, I just don't think you're the client for me, or this won't work, or I'm at capacity, or whatever it might be. You don't need to have a fight with them about it. You just don't take them on.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about that conversation. Maybe we're going too much into difficult conversations again, but tell us about how do you, is that again a gut feel for you of just, no, they're not my people, or are there warning signs?
There are signs, yeah. And if what they want to achieve is unrealistic, as an advisor, you've got to work that out at the start. So, for example, if someone has, $1 million and they're really annoyed with the property market and they've been looking for a year and a half and they've come to you in exasperation, the first thing you've got to work out is why haven't they bought in a year and a half? What's gone wrong? And there are some valid reasons and there are some warning bell reasons. If what they're looking for doesn't exist, then you've got to tell them nicely and respectfully and find out what else they could be interested in. And if you're hitting a brick wall, don't take on the work. I have said to someone, I'm very confident that I can't help you because I firmly believe that what you want doesn't exist. They might be annoyed at you and they'll show you a couple of, needles in the haystack that might have sold in the last 3 years that would have been good representations of what they're after. But frankly, that's not enough. I'm not looking for an anomaly result to underpin a likely result. So I just say, I'm sorry, I won't work with you until this is a different brief. Here's the homework that you'd need to do, and here's what I ask of you if you want to have another follow-up conversation. That's a pretty brutal conversation, and that's exactly how I am though.
Mm.
That's the first thing. If what they want doesn't exist, you're just setting yourself up for fail, and a frustrated client probably reimbursing them anyway. The next one is if they're disrespectful, and not necessarily directly, but it might be that they're just really difficult to get a hold of all the time. Just having that introductory meeting is an absolute nightmare. They're never available. They want 9 o'clock at night. They organise to be on with their partner and then one of them doesn't show. Super warning bell for me. If that's how it starts, it's how it's going to continue. So I won't take that client on either. If they're disrespectful about the value proposition, if they're not seeing value at the start, I'm going to try and turn them around after we've already had a conversation for half an hour about what I could do and how I do it. You've got to be prepared to let price objectives or value objectives go, because that won't go well for you either. And lastly, if I don't like the dialogue or their communication style, I feel like they're disrespectful, or if my staff have a bad time before I've even got to the call with them, there are warning bells, Andrew.
2 questions on the back of that I'm finding really interesting. One, has confident Cate always been around?
No.
And you would have done this from when you were 15, when people are saying, come and have a dart at the back of the bike sheds at high school, or is this something that you've learned to cultivate in yourself because of experience?
I've known for a long time in my career, even pre-university when I had part-time jobs. When you've got a difficult or nasty customer, when you haven't, but deflecting that or getting yourself out of that situation, you don't necessarily have the same tools as a 15-year-old, and it can sometimes escalate, and then a manager steps in. Having a boss that backs you is really important in those situations, and I'm always mindful of that with my team. If any of them get to a situation where I can see that there's angst and they're having to push back or deal with someone being like that, I've got to absolutely have their back and sometimes step in. But I wasn't always this confident, and you've got to be really careful. The busier you get, the more time is a very precious commodity as well, and you can be succinct and multitask and have a really good process flow, but you've still got to give people the time and the attention and the nurturing that they need as well, and finding that balance is very, very important. But if you've got someone that's not working out and they're just draining your energy or upsetting you, getting away from that as quickly as you possibly can means that you've got more time in your day to enjoy the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And the other question I had on the back of you selecting clients, because I think your answer is going to be similar to my experience with my own business, but did you always do that at the start of your business?
No way.
Or
No.
no? So this is something that's grown as you've got, obviously, one, you take everyone to pay off that photocopier and make sure that you can do that
Yeah.
at the very start, and then you start to evolve to be more selective with your clients.
Yeah, that's right. I'd rather take on briefs that are more challenging briefs than take on an easy brief with a challenging client. So what I mean by that is if I had a horrible client that wanted me to help them buy in Yarraville and then I had a beautiful client that wanted me to help them in Diamond Creek, I guess I'm driving Diamond Creek.
Yeah.
So there's ways to get to manage your workflow and to keep everyone busy without selling out and taking on someone who's really difficult. And I remember thinking a few years ago, actually it was pre-COVID, but I had a really painful client experience and ended up just saying, look, this isn't working. What say we part company, and how much of the amount that you've paid me do you think I should give back to you? And it was a very respectful conversation. They were great, and we worked it out straight away. They named the figure and I just said, that sounds fair to me. And I sent Ian a note and said, please reimburse them. I would have been way better off sitting on the couch eating Tim Tams and being bored for a week than taking that brief on, because all it did is cost me grief and then I paid it back anyway.
Yeah.
So there's some work that you're better off not having. I'd rather literally go for a walk in the park or take a couple of days off than have that.
Can you share a moment where you've been sort of tested personally or professionally, and challenged, and how you overcame or managed that? Given the podcast is called The Messy Middle, that's sort of the angle I'm looking at for you. When have you found yourself in it, and how did you get yourself out of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can think of a few, and I've dealt with them all and been pretty happy with the outcomes. I had a client many years ago who fell in love with a property that was a bit outside of her search band. So when I work with someone, this is what the spend is, this is what the budget is, these are the areas we want to buy in for a homeowner. Great, that's the brief. Now, if I'm working with someone who's got a slightly higher budget in a different suburb, I don't consider that a clash risk unless other client says, actually, I really like this suburb now and I've got more money. I've then got a problem, and it sometimes happens. And so I've got a very clear terms and conditions page that I give to people when we get started, and I will never say to someone I won't allow a flex. I absolutely will. But they've got to be mindful of flexing their budget or their search band if they bump into someone else. And every now and then there is someone else next door. Every now and then there isn't. In this particular case there was, and the property she liked I was already on. And she came into my office and wanted a meeting, and we sat in the meeting room, and my staff could hear her roaring at me. And I got along with her, but I knew she was very angry with me. It was a very emotional outburst. And we ended up resolving it because the client that I thought was on it, they had a few options, but I had to be very fair and clear with this client that had switched. And I said, they might well want it, and until they opt off it, I can't help you with it. And she wasn't happy about that. And how did I deal with it? I had to let her have her outburst because I could recognise that she was really fired up. Slammed her fist on the table, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I waited for that mood to kind of settle down a little bit and went through the terms and conditions again because we'd already been through that. And she knew, but I think she just, didn't want anyone to get between her and this property. And what I've resolved to do was have a conversation with the other client and explain the situation. And I said to her, I will give you a time frame that I'll come back to you with a yes or a no. If they're opting off it, it's all yours. If they're not willing to opt off it yet, I'll find you an alternative advocate and we'll talk about what portion of my fee is refunded to you. But I think it just, that was a very, everyone here remembers it because she yelled and slammed her fist, and everyone's blood pressure was up and it was tough, and my staff were a bit shaky, but what we resolved was very fair and reasonable, and I could see that she wasn't being personal. She was just feeling very emotional. And you've got to recognise that when you're dealing with someone. Can you resolve it? What's the fairest way to resolve it? Is this an emotional reaction? Will there be any, net loss out of this? will know she'll have the opportunity to bid on that property and she won't be out of pocket. She just won't necessarily be bidding with me. So, that's one that comes to mind. I've had agent dealings where, I had one guy say a few expletives and give me a hard time on the phone, and I thought I could easily talk to his boss or I could talk to him. I caught him the next day. He was still pretty cranky and pretty rude. So then I had a chat to his boss and just said, in the interest of us doing business down the track, I don't think it's great for he and I to be doing deals. So when his name's on the board, who in your team would you like me to deal with? Well, I got an apology, and he stepped into line because this particular agent didn't want that to be the case, and we just resolved it. That's just part of the agent buyer's advocate stoush thing that sometimes happens, but they're few and far between, Andrew.
Generally, how do you approach failure? We all confront it as business owners or people who are trying to make a difference or make a contribution, in your case, often for other people as well, for their value that you're providing. So how do you approach failure and what lessons do you take out of it?
If we miss anything, that to me is the biggest fail. And I take that so personally, whether you've missed one of the detail. I had a client many years ago and she was very clear about the townhouse requirements, and she had a lot of requirements. And one of them was, I don't want to be near a phone tower. I bought near a phone tower without realising. And, you can call it an oversight, you can call it negligence. I had, waking up in a cold sweat. She wasn't happy about it. I believe she's still in the property all these years on, but she was very clear that was what she didn't want. And I felt awful about that. I felt like I'd, failed a part of that assignment. So as joyous as I was about nailing this great townhouse, the phone tower, you've got to learn from that. And so incorporate another checkbox in your due diligence process to make sure that this thing happened and it's never going to happen again for another client. And there's lots of learnings for lots of people in my position when it comes to stuff like that. I had one client when we went to auction, and then, the hammer falls, we're all joyous. And he's like, so does it matter if I don't pay my deposit for another 3 weeks? I'm still doing an equity release. Well, I should have known that. So, okay, another step on the due diligence board, get client sign off for availability of funds before we bid. Just assuming they're pre-approved is not enough. He had an equity release. Could have lost us a deal. I had to, lightfoot through all of that and try and get a vendor and an agent to approve something after the fact. I thought that, honestly, I thought for a second there the underbidder would get the property.
And it's one of those things that there's an acceptance to then be able to move to the fix or the learning, isn't there? I think we can often in failure just, well, I didn't see that, or that wasn't on the plan, or, whatever the excuse is, versus just looking inward to get that lesson and make sure it's not necessarily an ongoing limitation.
Absolutely. And every time I look at a satellite imagery or, town planning portal, and I'm checking easements and covenants and overlays and all of the illegal dwellings and non-approved stuff, you've built up this ability over all of the years that you've been working and dealing with these problems to know what you need to look out for and what has to be on that due diligence checklist.
A couple of questions before we wrap up, Kate. Tell me, you're a high achiever in your life and in your business and the expectations you set for yourself. How do you balance that as a person between that high achiever, ambitious part of yourself to the content, happy part of yourself and getting that right?
Making sure that if you're looking forward to doing something work-related, indulge yourself. It's okay to do it. Put the kettle on, write your blog, you take that call, do something creative. That's okay. I don't like having to pigeonhole myself to, this is when I'm having Kate time and this is when I'm doing Cate Bakos property time. Just do what comes naturally, as long as your family and friends are getting the best of you. I think that's the most important thing. When you're on with them, you're completely focused and you're completely on.
Yeah, I like that too, Kate, because I think we often, that work-life balance, it's a lovely aspiration or intention, but I think we see it like they're two different buckets as opposed to you being you or people listening being themselves, and how do they engage in all of their life and the moments that they're in, as opposed to these two separate, I've worked this amount of time, I've got to have this much downtime, as opposed to enjoying the totality of what we're doing.
Yeah, agreed.
Tell me, what's one thing you've learned about money that you wish people knew?
Start early. That's it. Start early, because time is the most magic ingredient when it comes to building wealth. And so it's hard to start young because you've got all of these conflicting priorities. You've got, fun times and lower earnings when you're a graduate or even before you're a graduate. But if you can get on that property ladder, even with, a B grade, lower price property when you're young, that time ingredient is so very, very powerful. I started when I was 21 and it changed my life. And so I've wanted to see our children enjoy that. My husband's son, my beautiful stepson, is now 30 and he's got 2 properties and he's reaping the rewards of that now. He's got equity and choice, and, whether he decides to scale down his work or do something different or continue building wealth, I love that he has that choice. Our daughter is 18 and her savings are now up to 18,000. And I've told her when she gets to 22,500, I'll help her into the property market and get an apartment, and she can pop a renter in there, and she'll obviously be at university. So we'll need to potentially do a 99-1 deal with her so that we can be guarantors for her servicing, because a part-time job won't give her that security. It might give her the cash flow, but it could be intermittent. The banks might not like it. So I think recognising how valuable it is to get onto the property ladder as early as you can, that's what I've learnt about money, because you can earn big earnings and get started when you're 50, but if you can start young, you'll also learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, compound interest is a wonderful thing for us to tap into, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
What's one final piece of advice or insight that you'd like to offer, that a question I should have asked but haven't yet, or a piece of advice that served you well that you'd like to leave listeners with before we wrap up?
Well, you and I chatted, we just touched on this at the very beginning, I think before we went to air, and you asked me, what it's like being a leader, and, is it difficult being a female leader, and what are some of the challenges in this world where female leadership is just growing by the day, and I love it. I do want to chat about that. And I think one day we'll get to a point where I'm not referred to as a female leader, I'm just referred to as a leader. I love this industry for so many reasons, but that's one of them. There's no glass ceiling. If you're good at leadership, you can thrive. It is more difficult for females though, and I want to talk about that, because women can get a really rough end of the deal when it comes to leadership. You very much have a brighter spotlight on you in terms of people that are willing to critique you and scrutinise you. And sometimes it's a very unfair measure, how you look, how you dress, what you're wearing, how you're ageing, relationships that you've got. They're things that should bear no weighting when it comes to your ability to lead or the business that you run. And likewise, the things that you're saying, what you're writing, what your media appearances are having you talk about, we are very, very scrutinised, and sometimes by women. So I think not to get on a female bandstand here and talk about sexism, but it's still very real. And I think it'll be a great thing when we don't use the word woman leader or female leader, when we just use the word leader, and when people actually give credit for what that person is achieving. And for women out there, when you support each other, you can do some incredible things. But when you critique each other, you can pull each other apart more than guys can pull us apart. So I think it's very important to just pay homage to that.
It's a lovely place to finish, and to endorse what I said before we did start recording, which is, you're a good example of that for other people, Cate, in the way that you do conduct yourself just purely as a business owner and someone who's aspiring to do good things in their own industry and realm. So thanks for providing that example for other people out there and what you contribute to the whole real estate and property industry. It's terrific.
Oh, thank you for teasing it out of me and for having me talk about something more personal and more vulnerable. It's nice not to talk about property stats, and it was really special to get this opportunity.
No worries. Is there a way, or how can people find you or connect with you?
Well, I'm Cate with a C. So if you Google property and Cate, you'll certainly find me. But my website is catebakos.com.au.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cate. Really appreciate the insights, and thanks for jumping on. It's been great talking with you.
Likewise.
Two quick things before we wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to access the full list of show notes or explore some other episodes, simply visit andrewhorsfield.com. And please consider forwarding this episode to someone that you think would benefit. It will not only be appreciated by the person you choose, but help spread the word and amplify the impact I'm trying to make for the podcast. Thanks for listening.